Welcome everybody to this webinar on positioning our projects for success. Although I primarily work with project managers and executives, my first love is in project delivery with end user organizations who contract with IT firms for their new computer system. So for this webinar, whether you're on the IT side of project delivery or with an end user organization, there's something for each of you in this session. Again, welcome. It's slightly after 6 p.m., so let's get started. I'm just going to move over here to my slides. And there we are. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Merv, and my company is the People First Project Management. So when you go to my website, which is www.peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com, you'll see that I'm all about the people aspects of project management. The whole idea here is that I want to be able to help our projects achieve greater success. So imagine just for a moment, imagine that you are about to build your dream home. You sketch out the overall design, you add a few touches like vaulted ceilings, huge beams, solid wood doors. The exterior doors and the windows will be imported. They're going to be selected for their beauty and their security. The cabinets are all high-end. And think about this, the countertops are high-grade granite, imported specifically from some of the best quarries in India. The entranceway is featured on the front cover of this month's House Beautiful magazine. The smart home automation will be state-of-the-art. Exciting, right? But as you do your research, you discover something about the home building industry that you were not aware of. More than 40% of home building projects go over budget. Half of the new homes are not even ready on the date that you're scheduled to move in. And 30% don't include everything you had contracted for. And unfortunately, only one in seven are not actually completed. Would any of you build that home? I suspect nobody would. And so your dream goes up in smoke. Fortunately, those numbers are not true of the building industry. I know I've built my own home a couple of times now. However, they are true of our industry, at least according to a 2017 study by the Project Management Institute. How is that even possible? As an industry, we pride ourselves on our technical skills. As an industry, we excel at process. We spend millions, if not billions of dollars training our project staff in our various processes and methodologies to manage our projects with the utmost efficiency and effectiveness. Yet we continue to have project failures. Look at those numbers. 43% over budget, 49% not completed on time, 31% did not meet the project goals at all, 14% failed outright. So what's missing? Why do we keep missing these project deadlines? Why do we continue to overrun our project budgets? Why do we tolerate the bleeding of our profits that come with these project failures? We owe it to our customers. We project managers owe it to our customers, our management, our project teams to stop leaving money on the table. I recently came across the following quote, bear with me here for a second. With all of our efforts to improve project delivery practices, not just project management, but also architecture, business impact analysis, development, operational practices, how can this even be true? Now, what's interesting is that was quoted by BlueprintSys.com, and they're quoting the PMI survey project failure study. Interesting, this reference to PMI regards indicates our project failures. Clearly, ladies and gentlemen, our industry has a problem. Have you ever worked on a failing project or a project that has failed outright? I'm sure you would agree that it's not a pleasant experience no matter where in that project hierarchy you find yourself. So how is it, and this has troubled me for a long time, how is it that with first-rate technical skills, with our focused attention on process, how is it that our industry continues to have such a mediocre record in implementing computer systems? I don't get it. How is it that projects continue to come in late? How is it that IT vendors continue to have such substantial losses of profit and end user organizations experience such massive budget overruns? It really is a black eye to our industry. So this evening, what I want to do is talk about three different areas. I want to attempt to answer that today, what I've noticed from my own experience, and just by focusing on 3 points. Team interaction, client, so you see them, their client, end user interaction, subject matter expert interaction, and then focused, purposeful communication across our teams. In my consulting practice, I cover far more than what I can possibly outline here today. So in this hour or so that we have together, I want to just give you a little taste of what we can do as project management professionals. If you downloaded the handout, I encourage you to jot down some ideas that you can take back to your own projects, take back for your own edification, and then begin to apply some of these with your own project teams. A little bit about me, though. I wasn't always a IT professional. I started life as a farm boy in northern Manitoba on a grain farm. I credit life on the farm where I think probably where I learned responsibility at my dad's knee. We certainly learned a sense of teamwork. We learned the value of hard work, taking time to play when the work let up. I progressed through school and I did well in my studies. And at some point, though, I decided that green acres was not the life for me. Think about, though, that what I just kind of went through, those are for us in the IT industry, those are a lot of the exact same characteristics: responsibility, teamwork, hard work, playtime, as those are the same kinds of things that we do when we manage our projects. My parents decided that because I didn't want to spend time on the farm, that I was going to be a dentist. I said, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to spend the next 40 years of my life digging in people's mouths. But about this time, I became aware of the world of computers, and I went on to earn an honors degree in computer science and became what every farm boy's lifelong dream is, a computer programmer. Or as we were known around campus, the nerds. So imagine, you got to picture this though, my fellow engineers and I walking around this major campus, 20,000 students. Picture this: flood pants, white socks, burl creamed hair, pocket protectors, and a stack of 2,000 punch cards under our arms. Definitely chick magnets. Anyway, I graduated and went on to a great career, progressing from programmer to analyst, a project manager, to a vice president of a major corporation. And then I transitioned into the consulting field. And in 2003, I became an independent consultant, largely because I had seen so much of our less than stellar project delivery track record. Those numbers that PMI, that I showed you, those statistics that I showed you from PMI, I lived some of those on some of the projects that I worked on. And so when I began my consulting career, I determined that I would do more as an individual by coaching and consulting with client organization and IT providers on how to better deliver their projects. And for the last 16 years, I can honestly say that I have had virtually no unbillable days. Now, I can't say it's been the easiest career. I got to tell you this. I remember waking up in a Marriott hotel one morning with the faint recollection that I needed to get to the airport. At that time, I was managing a project in San Francisco. I had just started a brand new project in Phoenix. I was implementing a major enhancement for a project in Oklahoma City. I looked around my room, which looked like, and you'll probably appreciate this if you've been there, it looked like most other Marriotts, and I panicked. I had absolutely no idea where I was. Finally, I looked at the telephone next to my bed, and the address on the phone was Kansas City. I remembered then I had overnighted in Kansas City and was actually flying out the next morning to Phoenix. Now I looked at my watch, and then I looked at my phone, and then I looked at the clock by my bed, and then I opened up my computer to check the time. All four were different. Now I was really confused and really panicked. But wait, that's not all. It occurred to me that we had just gone from daylight savings time to standard time. And something told me that in the middle of all that Phoenix didn't change time. So I was really confused at that point. I raced to the airport wondering if I had actually missed my flight, but I arrived 3 hours early. At least the airlines knew what time they were leaving. But if you were in the consulting or the IT space, I'm just wondering, have you ever had such an experience? That's basically part of the career. And over my 43-year career, I've worked on projects in 20 US states, 2 Canadian provinces. I've consulted with IT providers, and I have advised client organizations or end user organizations on how to work with their IT project counterparts. In fact, the last 4 projects that I worked on were each budgeted at $100 million to almost $400 million. So I may not have seen everything in my 40 plus years, but I've seen a lot. I've seen some incredible successes. I've seen some horrible blunders. But before I get into the 3 points that I talked to you today, let me first set the stage. In the early 2000s, a study was conducted regarding the success of large IT DDI projects, DDI standing for Design, Development, and Implementation. These numbers that I'm showing you right now is an earlier study than the one I've already alluded to from the Project Management Institute. This study reported some shocking statistics that 84% of projects, now remember, this is less than 20 years ago. 84% of IT projects were not completed on time or within budget. You can read those there. Of those projects that overran their budget, they did so by an average of 45%. 17% failed so badly that they threatened the very survival or the very existence of the organization. I mean, think about that. You know, we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. They did use computers to put man on the moon, and that was from back 50 years ago. But imagine this. Imagine NASA coming to Neil Armstrong saying, hey, Neil, we've got some good news and some not so good news. Great, what's the good news? Neil, you and the boys are going to the moon. Fantastic. So what's not the good news? Well, there's a 17% chance that we could miss. Would you take that rocket flight? You know, when I began my career as a developer in the 1970s, and all of this is kind of getting to the point that I want to talk about here is our end user clients considered us brilliant and talented wizards. I mean, they felt we could work any kind of magic to make their day jobs easier. These were the days of punch cards, green screens, 15 by 11 green bar paper. True, the projects were less complex. Technology was less complex. Methodology and process were basic and often homegrown, if they existed at all. User requirements were largely defined by us, the technologists. Imagine that. In other words, we were the ones who told the end users what their new system would look like, how it would work, when it would be completed. Oh yeah, we involved the users in the requirements definition, but this was mainly to understand their basic job functions. And that way we could tell them how to do their jobs after they put their new systems in place. If all the new system did was to make the current work faster, even if the current work functions were inefficient, so be it. And if the end users hated the new computer system, well, tough. After all, we were the computer experts, not them. I mean, that's the days that I grew up in early in my career. But the statistics that I just quoted to you, that's where these statistics came from. And it just talked about the fact that technology excellence, no matter how good we were, did not guarantee success. I mean, 17% of projects overrunning so badly that they almost threatened the very existence of the company itself. So if technology alone were the answer, we would not have such a horrible, horrible track record. Well, in 1969, the Project Management Institute organization was established. Oh, it had noble objectives. I'm going to put them up here shortly. You can read them there. It says to foster recognition of the need for professionalism in project management, et cetera, et cetera. But look at what I highlighted in red. It was recognized early on, this is 1969, that professionalism, communications, user interface were all important components into the development of these systems. but there was little in place to train our project managers or enforce any kind of standardization, which is why in 1996, that same organization, the Project Management Institute, produced the first project management body of knowledge, where we call it affectionately the PMBOK. And this was to standardize project management procedures and approaches. Now, it allowed us to add so much process to our projects. Remember, up until now, we were technology-based, but the PMBOK and the PMI allowed us to add so much process to our projects that we couldn't help but succeed. In fact, I was joking with the PMI audience a couple of weeks ago when I presented to them that I can imagine this, that 200 years from now, my great-great-great-great-grandchildren will visit Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, and there they will see the Book of Kells, the first copy of the King James Bible, and the project management body of knowledge. I mean, I can't wait. So anyway, we added process to technology, we had some success, but we still had a lot of failures. And there it is, the project management book of knowledge. But this is why, if you really think about it, this is why the results that we produced in 2017, that the PMI produced in 2017, were so puzzling. I mean, as you saw these numbers earlier, think about this, almost half of the projects were not completed on time. And you can see the other ones, 30% didn't even meet the project goals, 14, we're still at a huge failure of 14%. This is not a huge improvement over the early 2000 numbers. So it was clear that adding process to technology did not guarantee success. So if you really think about it, in my 40 plus years, and I was thinking about this as I was preparing this presentation, in my over 40 years in design, development, and implementation of systems, I can recall only one project in all the time that failed outright because of the failure in applying technology. I have not seen any yet that have failed because of process. I've worked on projects, yes, where poor process was a contributing factor to poor results, but it was not the main factor. So what is the missing piece? We're good at technology, we're good at process. So what's the missing piece? Why are we still having so many project failures? I stated this before, as an industry, we are good at technology, but we should be having much higher success rates. And this is where I've spent much of my career, certainly much of the last 16 years as an independent consultant, observing, and what I did was observe different project behaviors to see, first of all, what went well. I also looked at where improvements could be made. In fact, I recently consulted for an organization on a project that was valued at over $300 million. I remember thinking, what if the IT provider improved its processes just 3%? Do the math, that's $9 million to the bottom line with just slight improvements in process. And I think 3% is almost always completely doable. What if we could achieve 10%? So I want you to think about the life cycle of a project. At least this has been my experience over most of my career. Projects always start out well. The IT provider submits a proposal, we make some incredible, wonderful promises of features and benefits, and we offer a price that the client absolutely cannot refuse. We just know we're going to be successful. And this is what we call the honeymoon period. The honeymoon begins, but then we begin to execute. Projects are not always executed well. Something happens during the course of project execution and things begin to go bad. Schedules begin to slip. There's one failure point after another. The client begins to get antsy. There's a huge gap suddenly develops between project execution and the successful outcome of that project. This is what we call the honeymoon is over period. I once asked a senior partner of a major consulting firm, I said, how do projects fall so far behind schedule? He looked at me and said, simple, one day at a time. But what often happens next is that a lot of project managers stop right here. And when I say stop right here, I mean they stop thinking technology and process and they panic. They look at the schedule, They look at an unhappy client and they begin to throw good practice out the window and start taking shortcuts. They try to make it up somewhere, whether it's on the backs of people through overtime or some sort of shortcut. They hope to make this up somewhere. They begin to fill that gap between execution and success with what I have affectionately termed as BFI, which we used to call brute force and ignorance. I've spent the last 16 years of my career, probably longer actually, observing, testing, trying to figure out what that missing piece is. Why do we suddenly go from the honeymoon period to sloppy execution and less than stellar success? Over the years, I've consulted, I mentioned this before, I've consulted both with IT providers and I've also consulted with end user organizations, helping them to prepare them for their eventual new system. So I'm probably one of very few project management professionals who has seen project execution from both vantage points. And I think in that time, I have developed some incredible expert insights into this project delivery challenge. It suddenly became very clear to me. If we're great at technology, if we're great at process, that only leaves one area for significant improvement. You've probably guessed by now that it's people. We need to work better. We need to focus more on the human factors or the people aspects of project management. We need to put people first, which, by the way, in case you're wondering, that's why I named my company People First Project Management. So think of a project as a three-legged stool, one leg each for technology, for process, and for people. If even one of those legs is wobbly, then the entire stool becomes wobbly. And most often, my experience anyway, has been that that wobbly leg is almost always the people leg. Okay, so I've laid the groundwork, I think, I'm hoping I've laid the groundwork at this point for how I came to this insight. And now let's get back to those few ideas that I had been talking about in terms of the team interaction, in terms of client and user interaction, and the focused, purposeful communication. As I mentioned before, if you've downloaded the handout, you can start to possibly get some ideas here that you can take back to your project site. So first of all, let's take a look at how we can keep the members of our project team involved and interested. Obviously you're familiar with org charts, but think about how a typical project team structure, and think about how the daily activities on a project work. The project manager at the top of the structure and her direct reports have their fingers on the pulse of everything that's happening on the project, or at least they think they do. They review the schedule daily, they communicate with their client counterparts, they check in with the team leads, and they disseminate information down the organization charts to the teams daily, mostly on what they believe is a need-to-know basis. They conduct periodic all-hands meetings, and they attempt, through all of these things to keep the entire project synchronized and in the know. But here's what really happens. They treat staff, they need to be able to treat staff as though they matter. What really happens is, as information is passed down that line from project manager to her direct reports, and then to their direct reports, and finally to the team members at the bottom of the hierarchy, the information becomes diluted at best and distorted or confused at worst. And unfortunately, the project staff at the bottom of the org chart, the ones who are performing the lion's share of the project work, they receive the least amount of helpful, accurate communication. Oh yeah, we keep them in their silos, we expect them to perform, but they're the ones who have their sleeves rolled up. And we know that in the greatest detail how these are the ones who have their, sorry, I got my words twisted here. These are the ones who know their sleeves, who have their sleeves rolled up, and who know the greatest amount of detail about how any changes will affect the efforts that they've already had in place. As one young developer once told me, they treat us like mushrooms. We're kept in the dark and we're fed fungus food. I've witnessed this behavior, by the way, firsthand in many projects. I recall in one client engagement, the client introducing an extensive change to a major functional subsystem. Now, The team lead did what he was supposed to do. He conducted an analysis for the change. He provided the estimates. He assigned the resulting task to his staff, but at no time did he ever consult his analysts or his developers. At no time did he ensure that the full extent of the requested change was completely understood when he put his estimates together. And at no time did he then take that analysis and provide a detailed overview to his entire team. So he went from there, he went out, tasked out the work, and he kept his team members working in their silos. That's the way a lot of these projects works. But you know what happened next. It was a near disaster. So they were deep into the change request. The developers realized that work products completed prior to the change also needed some significant rework and recoding. And had the developers been consulted during the team lead's redesign, they probably would have caught this oversight and saved hundreds, I'm talking hundreds of hours of rework. But wait, there's more. Several weeks later, when these changes were being tested by the user in the user acceptance test phase, they found a major incompatibility between the changes that they had just performed and a major downstream subsystem. Again, think about this from a communication standpoint. Had the team lead vetted the change with his entire team, this incompatibility would have been quickly identified, it would have been quickly accounted for, and several thousand hours, by now, several thousand hours and several weeks in the schedule would not have been lost. Staff was required to work overtime, momentum was lost, morale was undermined. I mean, it was just a disaster. Errors were introduced. So many of the task deadlines were missed. The project ended up being delayed. And of course, you know that the client was unhappy and profitability took a huge hit. So how can we get our greatest asset and our people involved contributing to the bottom line? How do we absolutely avoid these particular situations? Let me tell you, meet DeAndre. DeAndre and I met while I was working on a major project in an eastern US state. And I saw something in DeAndre. And he had shared with me a couple of his kind of career aspirations. So I offered him to improve his ability to speak in front of an audience. That's one of the things that he wanted to do. We began to, he had a major presentation to do, so we began to work on his content. And then at some point I stayed back on a weekend and arranged for a large conference room on a Saturday morning. We rehearsed his presentation. We rehearsed his stage presence in this huge auditorium that mimicked where he would be speaking. And the next week, when the time came for him to present, he knocked it out of the park. All it took was someone to take notice in him and to help him. Similarly, on another project I was on, we had a young analyst who wanted exposure to our senior project executive. She felt that she was unknown, that she was unnoticed. She was young, but we gave her the opportunity to gain exposure by putting her on a committee to plan monthly extracurricular activities for the entire project team. Not only did her senior management, the people she wanted to get to know, observe her enthusiasm and efficiency, she was able to influence the types of events that her peers wanted to attend. Let me ask you this. Do you think that she even missed a single beat on her daily tasks when she was allowed to get in front of her senior managers? We had another situation where a senior developer for whom English was her second language wanted to develop her writing skills. So we thought about it and we creatively gave her the task of drafting the weekly status report for her entire team. Of course, it had to be reviewed initially by the team lead, but over the months, this young lady became a very capable writer. In fact, she was so informed through this of her entire team's ongoing progress that whenever her team leader was away, she became the substitute team lead and her career progressed from that. Another situation, I had a new developer. He was curious about the end user functionality that his programming would eventually support. So what I had done was I had coached him, spent time coaching him in the end user policies and the procedures, and then took him to the actual offices for him to tour and study these activities for himself. But here's what happened. As a direct result of this sort of extracurricular activity, his curiosity, his work product was delivered almost defect-free. He became invaluable to the client during their user acceptance testing, and he was able to derive very quick solutions whenever there was issues identified by the end users. You know, I just gave you, these are just a few examples. I probably got hundreds. But in each of these situations, think of that org chart that I presented earlier. These people were at the bottom of that org chart, working in their silos, task-driven to a project schedule. But in each of these situations, because we took them out of their silos briefly for some extracurricular activities, the extra tasks that they took on were voluntary. They saw new opportunities. And what happened was they ended up contributing beyond their assignments for the overall good of the project. They felt in the know. They were kept informed about what was going on. They learned new skills, and this opened up absolutely greater avenues for faster promotion. But here's the unseen benefit, and this is where project executives, project managers don't see this. As a direct result of we project managers focusing on the people aspects, I'm going to say that word again, the people aspects of project management, these staff there were fewer missed deadlines. We had very few change requests. Our functionality was much more accurate. We had more satisfied end users. And as a result, we maintained solid profitability. And so what happened was becoming proficient in the people aspects of the project management, which is a learned skill, helped us to perform better. So from my observations, this is not, people aspects is not an innate project management skills. The natural instincts of project managers is what? To keep their staff assigned in their silos, keep their staff heads down on their tasks. But what I'm saying here, what I'm telling you is that project managers need to learn to look for opportunities to create the environments where staff can really feel that they can take on additional tasks outside of their normal responsibilities. And the project overall will benefit. You know, early in my career, I was assigned the role of a training and implementation manager on a major project that our company was doing for the state of Alaska. Our firm was the design, development, implementation vendor on the project. And I had just recently been promoted from a developer to a lead position. I was learning my new role as quickly as I could. And what had happened was the project was funded through a partnership with the federal government. So shortly after I arrived on site, we were informed that the feds were sending a team of auditors to Alaska to conduct a project assessment and a status review. Now, I suspected that they were just coming up to fish, but no, they showed up on the project site. In the meantime, my boss had asked me to prepare the status report presentation. And so as a newly minted team lead, I was happy to absolutely do this because, you know, this was part of my new promotion. So I soon had the presentation ready. I soon had the slides ready to be reviewed by him. And I sat down with him and I said, when do you want to review these slides? He goes, well, I'm leaving on vacation, so it's all yours. This could not be happening. Has anyone else felt this way? Have anyone else been put into a situation like this? So 3 things happened. This is what I tell people. 3 things happened that day of that presentation. I managed to squeeze about 20 minutes of material into a full 2.5 hours. At the end of the presentation, the only one still awake was me, and that's because I was the only one still standing. And that afternoon, I left the office and I joined an organization that prompted me, or that promoted public speaking skills. But I thought about this, and I thought, what if I had not been the type of individual who immediately looked for a solution for my lack of public speaking abilities? What if in my humiliation, I would have packed my bags and just left Alaska and left the firm? How much more productive would it have been had my manager focused even a little on the people aspects of his job and provided me with the requisite training so that I could confidently address the federal auditors? So whenever I now speak to IT providers about putting as much emphasis on the people aspects of project management as they do on technology and process, Unfortunately, these are the kinds of answers I get here. I'll often get this. We train all of our team leads and project managers to get them PMI certified, so they get their project management professional designation. You know what that translates to me? They're earmarking substantial training dollars to keep the process leg of the IT project still steady. Another one I hear often is every one of our managers receives ongoing training in their technologies that they are expert in, and that's to keep up their skills. Translation, we're putting significant focus on the technology leg of the stool to keep it solid. Or I've also heard this one. All of our project leads are required to attend leadership training. Translation, they believe that leadership skills are generic. They believe that they're cookie cutter. They believe that if they just hire a local training group or just have one of their experienced project managers do this, they can conduct the training, leadership training. But again, cookie cutter. Another word, and I'll leave you with this one as well. We provide as much training as our project schedules will allow. Well, you're a seasoned project developer, you know this very well, that project schedules are always tight and they seldom allow for any kind of training that is not process or not technology oriented. So you notice which leg of the stool didn't get any attention? And this is where even, and I'm going to tell you this is where even the most sophisticated, experienced IT providers miss the point. First of all, I'm going to tell you this, that the technology and process trainings that they refer to, they do not include training in the people aspects of project management. I may be out of line here, but the previous rendition of the PMBOK, that huge book that you showed me, that was, I believe, was over 960 pages. And if I remember correctly, I went through that book and I saw about 6 pages. I may be speaking out of turn, so somebody's going to write me an email, but I remember seeing about 6 pages that were devoted to dealing with the people aspects of project management. We need to do better. So if training in the people aspects is covered at all, it is a bare acknowledgement, just a basic acknowledgement that project managers need training in what they refer to as the soft skills as well. If I had only one takeaway from 40 years as an IT consultant, it's this. The soft skills are the hard skills, and they are seldom taught well. The other thing is leadership training that IT organizations provide to project management staff is typically cookie cutter, generic. It's not particularly helpful. The leadership training providers that are brought in provide the same training, the absolute same training for project management staff that they just did for the big box store down the road or the hotel chain across town. If they do customize this training at all for IT, their customizations are woefully inadequate. In fact, they're so unaware of the unique challenges that we face as IT professionals that they're unable to even address those unique challenges during any kind of leadership training. And then the other one, and this one, I don't know even where to put this, but the IT firms, I've seen them hire consultants to do specifically personality assessments with project managers. These assessments then are considered effective training in people aspects. But in my mind, they're mere substitutes. So what they'll do is they'll set aside full days to discover each manager's personality type or their DISC profile. And then the results are then explained as to how individuals need to be able to use this information to best work with each other and their staff. I'm going to make a confession to you right now. Years ago, I'm probably thinking 25 years ago, I learned that I was an ENTJ in the Myers-Briggs assessment. To this day, I remember ENTJ. But to this day, I don't ever remember using that knowledge in working with my fellow managers or my project staff. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that these tests can be useful if they're followed through and applied. But to use them as genuine substitutes for much needed training in the people aspects of the kinds of challenges that we as project managers face, that it's superficial at best, and most often it's inadequate. A few years ago, one of my colleagues conducted a project audit for a highly respected IT firm on a major project implementation in Australia for the Australian federal government. The summary from the client, as told to her, was the vendor came in on time, they were within budget, they met the requirements of the contract, and we'll never work with them again. For that client, it came down to the people aspects of how their staff were treated through the project delivery. In this case, by the way, the poor project management fundamentals didn't negatively affect the profitability of the project. I mean, the client did say that they came in on time and budget, but it cost the IT firm follow-on business. So if soft skills training is an add-on to technology or process training, and if that's inadequate, if cookie cutter generic leadership training is inadequate, if personality assessments are inadequate, just how should IT organizations be providing training to their project managers? And especially with regard to the people aspects of project management. Well, let me say this by saying that training in the people aspects is most effective when it is for this team, for this project, for this end user, and for this time. As I mentioned earlier, when I'm contracted by an organization to conduct a team assessment, I go on to the project site as an observer, and I like to do it in the middle of the action. So I think if you ask any IT project management professional, they're going to agree that every project is different. You're going to have different IT staff, different end users, different technologies, always different challenges. And so based on my observations during the team assessments, where I spend time in team meetings, where I spend time watching them do requirements definitions, where I spend time watching the teams work with each other. As a result of that, I then prepare a customized team development program. And what I do with that is I can address the absolute people aspects of project management that are in most need of attention. And when I say most need of attention, I mean for this team, for this project, for this end user, for this time. That's not to say that these skills, when they're learned for this situation, are not lifelong skills that can be carried to other projects. But we tend to tailor those exactly for the need at the moment. The team development program is created for project managers by project managers who have been there, done that, who understand the leadership demands and the challenges of what we go through as IT project managers. And I'm going to say again, this is not a cookie cutter. This is not an out-of-the-box generic leadership training program. Yeah, it focuses on developing project management skills, but it does so for the situation at hand. And as I mentioned before, these are learned skills that are absolutely transferable to other projects in the same way that we expect technical skills or process skills to be transferred. I think it was, I don't remember who it was, but they said these skills, these particular skills that I'm talking about at this point, are in short supply. And therefore, if any project manager has them, that makes them more valuable. So there's 4 skills that I typically get asked to work with project managers, and these ones provide the greatest return. Public speaking. Here's what I found is that most project managers lack effective public speaking skills, and one of the things they don't understand is the nuances of presenting to either their own executive, which is different than presenting to their client executive or their project staff or their client staff. What I find is they're not even aware of techniques to be used in different situations, such as briefings to their stakeholders or status updates or requirements, any kind of situation where they find themselves in. But most project managers are totally unaware of how poorly they present. And what I can tell you that this is a make or break skill, and project success depends on it. The other, I didn't mean to hit that. The other ones, and you probably understand these as well, writing skills. When I came up through the ranks, writing skills were not considered an important project management skills. I mean, after all, we were technology people. And even today, most project managers don't write well. And when I say write well, I mean be able to, whether it's a project, status report, or a difficult memo or a situation like that, they don't understand well what it takes from a project management perspective to put the correct nuance on. Even in their informal memos, they tend to find difficult situations. I have literally witnessed staff removed from a project for inappropriate wording in a PowerPoint presentation. I've seen I was involved in one project that was completely terminated after a harsh formal memo was given to the client. I've seen relationships damaged because of emails that were, oh yeah, they were accurate, but they were not edited for tone. So while people can go out and get generic writing skills, it is my absolute belief that project managers have a unique requirement to be able to tone their skills to develop the message that they need to do. Meeting facilitation tends to be one of those things that people think, well, anybody can do this. But I'm telling you, the ability to lead discussions and keep participants involved and to effectively reach conclusions for which the meeting was intended in a high-stress project management environment is a skill that absolutely needs to be learned and can be learned well. Again, few project managers have the nuances of the skill. You know, it wasn't that long ago that I was involved in a project that was delayed for several months at the cost of, get this, several $1 million a month. Someone paid for every month of delay, several $1 million. And it wasn't because of poorly implemented technology. It wasn't because of because of inadequate process, but it was because of poorly facilitated, poorly managed requirements gathering sessions. People did not know how to facilitate requirements gathering properly, and it cost the project, we estimated, over $35 million. It's a very specific, critical type of skill that needs to be learned. Meeting facilitation is it's not easily satisfied, by the way, by generic out-of-the-box meeting facilitation skills training. So think about that when you go back to your project sites in terms of some of the demands that your IT project managers require. We've put so much focus on Gantt charts and technology and that the basics we don't spend enough time on, and that pays off in dividends when project managers understand this and can facilitate well. It pays huge dividends to the project. By the way, the ability to read people, the ability to understand, that's the last point on this slide here, the ability to understand whether it's facial expressions or gestures or cultural norms or, you know, any sort of nonverbal communication. Again, that becomes one of those trainable, learnable, absolutely necessary skills in the people aspects of project managers. So here's the stereotype, and you guys can relate to this. The stereotypical view of IT professionals is that they are dominated by logic and they've got little natural, what we call EQ or emotional quotient. Now, there's some truth in this. Project success depends on our, you know, as project managers, on our logical abilities. But if projects are anything, it's that they rely first and foremost on people, both the IT staff and the end user staff that is on the project. You know, the ability to communicate and to intuitively read people is a skill that can be learned. In my work with IT providers, I've been also asked to coach on other areas such as productivity, ethical conduct, negotiations, etc. But these four that you see up on your screen right now are the ones that I am most often called in to help project managers with. But even more important, I think, than team interaction is the client interaction. Working with the end users to make sure, you know, those that have been assigned to our projects as subject matter experts to the project. We as project managers, and you guys can relate to this, we get so caught up in schedule and process that we often forget about our end users, the less technical people in the project, until we need them for some task completion. And what happens is that end users these days, I know, have become much more demanding in their system requirements, and they're much more demanding in a collaborative partnership with IT. Remember the example that I used from my early days in IT, where technology was king and people thought, well, whatever we get because these people are so smart. It doesn't work that way anymore. The end users are very capable and very willing to let us know as IT providers what it is that they need in their systems. So all that is to say that the people aspects of project management that I've been talking to up until now does not stop with IT staff. These skills are equally effective when we extend them to when our dealings with end users on the project. And what often happens, we as IT professionals, rather than take the time to learn the business of our end users, we expect our end users, the non-technical, the client staff assigned to the project, we expect them to understand our IT jargon. And that's just not right. We expect them to pick up automated testing tools. We expect them to pick up automated UI simulation tools. We expect them to do these things as though they were part of our IT teams. And what happens when we have those expectations and treat them like that is we end up with end users on our projects who are frustrated, they don't collaborate, and the overall result, again, is a system that is not well defined and a system that, again, is in danger of losing profitability. And that's something that we're always working against. You know, several years ago, I can remember this as though it happened yesterday. I was providing project oversight for a client organization on a major IT project. So I walked into a joint application design session where a very bright young analyst, very bright young man, was explaining to the end user, his client, what her business requirements were. So do you see what I just said? He was explaining to her what her business requirements were. So the end user, this young woman, was clearly not grasping what he was describing, but she kept nodding her head as though she did. Why I was the only one to see this, I have no idea. But anyway, I stopped the session and I asked the analyst, I asked him several questions. And as he answered me, he suddenly realized that he had not understood the business requirements at all. And he was in fact confusing the user. And here's the other thing, the user was nodding her head, yes, up and down, because she didn't want to appear stupid. So he was communicating at one perspective, she was pretending she was understanding, and what was happening is it was not being understood. So he tried to use a different approach, and at that point she was able to respond knowledgeably, and the requirement was soon fleshed out. But think about this. This situation could have been, this one situation could have been detrimental further down the line in the project after all of the effort had gone into developing the wrong solution for a misunderstood requirement. Do we want to know where our projects go awry? It's simply things like this. And they become so simple. You know, it's so simple when you look backwards, but when you're in the thick of things, people don't see this. And this is where in my working with people first project management, where I can work with the IT providers to even understand how it is that they're treating their staff and their end users. You know, when I left the IT corporate world in 2003, my main objective was, in fact, to provide independent consulting services specifically to end user clients. I felt that they were at a severe disadvantage because of their lack of project knowledge or IT knowledge, and they ended up getting put into these high-stress project environments where the IT providers pushed them hard. And so as I worked with end users to prepare them to work side by side with IT staff, here's what I discovered. When trained using these techniques of the people aspects of project management, getting them involved, when they were trained, not only were the client project staff completely capable of keeping pace with their IT counterparts, they often conceptualized better end user solutions than the IT guys did. Interesting. So today, when I conduct project team assessments for IT providers, this is one place where I really dig deep into the people aspects. I focus on their IT to client working relationship. And this is where I often uncover large untapped opportunities for improving the overall probability of project success. End users are absolutely eager learners. And so IT provider, this is what I've done with projects when I get hired to them, but this is also where I encourage IT providers. They would do well to spend time and effort to actually put into their project estimates time to train their end user counterparts in their aspects in the roles that they'll be performing in the project. The extra time spent with training the end users will be made up in probably 10 times over the life of a project, because the end users will then be able to keep pace with them. These are areas where, much like when I work with IT providers, when clients, when end user organizations get me to come in, these four areas tend to be ones in which they want the most training in. If I can train them in requirements gathering, using the processes and the tools, if I can train them in user acceptance test processes and methods, including how to set up their user test cases, also in implementation planning and training the trainer methods and tools, you know, all it takes is some work with them so that when they understand what it means to get involved in the project sites, in the project experience, they do so well. Whether it's here in requirements definition, whether it's getting involved in the user acceptance testing, whether it's actually planning their implementation. Here's what's interesting. You know, IT understands the system that they've developed, but they don't know the client organization. But the end users who have been on this project not only understand the system, they also understand their own organization. And so if we train them in the ability to understand how to, the pros and cons of how to roll out the systems, they become much more effective, and we save sometimes months on a project schedule. And of course, one of the things that we like to do is we like to train them to train their own staff on how to use the new system. I find this is probably one of the most effective techniques, one of the most effective uses of my time, and certainly with IT providers' time, is that if they can train the staff to train their own staff well, that they again save much effort and much time on the project. You know, I can tell you, I am so embarrassed to say sometimes how often that I've been on a project and I've heard my IT counterpart staff say, well, that's their job. And then I watch as that short-sighted attitude costs the project in schedule and in profits. You know, I had an old boss, he was fond of saying, it doesn't help to point the finger and say, your end of the boat is sinking. We're in this together and we need to help each other. And one thing that I definitely know from an IT vendor side who's pushing these projects out the door, if they train and get their user staff involved, those that are on the project, projects will go very well and will become much more successful. Client staff are your absolute guarantee of success, and we need to treat them well. What I find is that if we instruct and coach them in these vital aspects of their roles in the project, they do so well. So let me ask you, and I know you can't respond, but how does a project team apply these people aspects of project management to their client interaction? Actually, in many ways, it's just an extension of training the project managers to make sure that they execute exactly the same for their end users as they do for their own team. Think about it. It's for this team, for this project, for this end user, for this time. In fact, from my own experience, here's some things that we've done on most, you know, think about this, on most every project that we work on, there's tools and technology training for our IT staff. Why not bring the client staff in this as well? It saves them mind, it saves them time, and it also helps them understand what it is we're doing. We put on lunch and learns for our staff. Why not bring in the client staff? We get our staff involved in requirements gathering. Why not get our user staff involved in those as well? And then there's several others that we work with them, where if we treat our client staff as absolute major contributors to our projects, then we have an almost definite guarantee of success. And the last thing I want to talk about today, again, if you're taking notes, this is an incredible opportunity, is to get our people involved in focused, purposeful communication. As George Bernard Shaw once said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I can tell you, just from one of my experiences, it was I remember it was like it was yesterday. It was 7:30 in the morning. There was 21 of us, and we were in a regular morning huddle. There was 20 user acceptance testing staff from the client organization. And there was myself, their project advisor. Frustrations were running high because the project deadline was looming and there were still several hundred test cases that we needed to finish. And what was frustrating was that there were about 700 unresolved defects that were slowing them down. The testing staff, these were end users, were averaging about 60 hours a week, and not a single person in that room believed that the system would be ready or to be implemented on time. Just then, the project manager, now watch what's happening, 7:30 in the morning, the project manager for the vendor, the IT vendor, walked into the room. She was unannounced, she was uninvited, and she proceeded to tell the testers that they weren't testing fast enough. And get this, they were reporting too many defects, like it was their fault. And by the way, could they possibly committing to passing just 2 more test cases per tester per day and we would be ready to go? But here's what happened. As she was speaking, I watched our testing manager, physically turn in her chair. She had her back to the project manager, and every question that she was given, she answered, but she answered by addressing the wall. And here's what surprised me. When the vendor's project manager left the room, I walked out with her, and she turned to me and she said this. She said, "I thought that went rather well, don't you?" I was stunned. Talk about not understanding body language, talking about not understanding verbal inflection. No, I told her, I said, "No, I think what you did was just the opposite." You know, the single most critical component of any project is communication, whether it's written or whether it's in presentations or whether it's interaction in meetings or in work sessions or informal conversations, social interaction. And in this situation, as I just described, it's so important also to be able to read and understand body language. You see, communication makes or breaks projects and careers. And communication makes or breaks the people end of the IT projects too. Some of the things that I've witnessed, unfortunately, many unfortunate but avoidable situations. I've seen a project shut down over a 1-page memo that went to the wrong audience. I saw an analyst's career derailed because of an off-color word that he inadvertently left in a PowerPoint presentation. I've seen project miscommunication and misunderstanding because of a reply all. I know none of you have ever done that, but a reply all to an email that went to unintended recipients. I've seen the loss of credibility for an IT team because of a forwarded email chain that had unflattering commentary way down deep in the chain. I saw a project delayed for over 7 months because the project manager refused to accept the advice of his end users. Many such experience. In fact, I've seen deep mistrust caused by project status reports that were spun incorrectly to deflect blame onto another party. And it ended up creating project delays. You've probably experienced similar war stories. And definitely I could go on and on, but you get the picture. Communication is a learned skill, it's a critical skill, and it needs to be performed well. And it is probably the critical component of the people aspects of project management. When I conduct project team assessments for IT providers, I definitely tailor that team development communication module to specifically address areas for improving project management communications. I've just listed a few of them here, but you know, what I've often been told by project managers when they see this is they say, well, this is common sense. This is mom and apple pie. We do this. The fact is they don't. The fact is the kinds of examples I just gave you, had they taken some understandable training for project managers by project managers in these areas, those sorts of things would not have happened. Yes, it's common sense, but it's amazing when you get in the throes of a very difficult project, how quickly we forget common sense and we can get involved in these things. So these are the sorts of things that I get working with people on in terms of the communication processes. Social interaction, believe it or not, is a huge part of projects, and it's often the part that's not done well. As a longtime IT consultant once told me, the single biggest accomplishment in project communication is the certainty that it has taken place. Actually, what I want to do is I want to change George Bernard Shaw's comment and make it applicable for all of our project managers. So here's what I'll tell you, that here's my mission with People First Project Management. It's to work with organizations is to develop the people aspects, concentrating in these three areas, because as an industry, we need to absolutely improve upon these failure statistics that I had shared earlier. So I want to thank you now for participating with me on this webinar. I've tried to pack 43 years of project successes and failures into just about a single hour, maybe a few minutes over. And I trust that you were able to take even one or two thoughts from our time together and maybe begin to think about how you want to implement them immediately with your own project teams. What I will say, though, is that before I leave here, I want to give you an opportunity, because I'd like to help you to stop leaving money on the table. I'd love to be able to help your project managers drastically, I'm talking drastically, improve their project success rates, and then leave them with some lifelong skills that they can apply to this project, the current one that they're on, and any future projects. And so before I close, I do have a gift for you. I'm offering participants on this call a 30-minute phone call with me to discuss the challenges that your own project teams are facing, whether you're on the project, the IT side or the client side, the project challenges that you're facing in your efforts to deliver a successful project. Go to, there it is, yeah. Go to my website, peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com/call. And there you'll see a brief questionnaire to prepare for a call. And then I'll schedule that as soon as I receive your information. Again, write this down in your notes, peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com/call. And I'd love to hear from you. By the way, my contact information is on the handout that you downloaded earlier for this webinar. And what I want to say is, let's improve our success rate and let's stop leaving money on the table. So again, thank you. Thank you for attending to this. We did go about 7 minutes over time. I appreciate that. And at this point, I will say goodbye and good luck to you. Thank you very much.